Good morning. I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage 4 amazing National Geographic explorers whose work to build cultural empathy and create cultural understanding is groundbreaking. To help us guide us in this conversation about building human connections as we address global challenges, we have Sayed Gul Kalash, archaeologist, Aziz Abu Sarah, cultural educator, Losang Rabgey, social innovator, and Erika Larsen, visual storyteller. Let's be seated. For 130 years, National Geographic has worked to chronicle the human journey and to try to make sense of our place in it. In April, we produced a special issue on race, and in that special issue, we included a story that was really a story about us versus them and our natural tendency to surround ourselves with people who are like us, often with devastating effects. One of the stirring photographs in the issue was a man embracing a woman. And that man had been responsible for the murder of her 4 children during the Rwandan genocide. But through lots of work around reconciliation and healing, they are now able to move on with their lives in a harmonious way. And most of our panel here is doing similar kinds of work where we're trying to build cultural understanding and empathy. And so we're going to hear from each of them and then engage in a discussion about where we go from here. And we're going to start with Sayed Gul Kalash. Sayed is an archaeologist, and one moment. She is trying to preserve Kalash culture. She represents a community that previously was more than 10,000 people. That's now the size of 3,500, and the community is marginalized, and she's trying to build awareness about the group and trying to preserve the culture and trying to get recognition for the group. She herself is one of the only women of her community who has been trained as a scientist, and we're going to hear more about the work that she's doing.
Thank you. Kalasha, the religion of peace and mutual coexistence. The people who celebrate from death to birth, their ceremonies, they express everything in songs, they express everything in celebrations. This picture is pre-1947 image of Kalasha people. 13th, 14th century, the Kalasha were many thousands. They were living, some of the Kalasha people were living in Afghanistan, some were in Pakistan. Unfortunately, those who were in Afghanistan were converted by force. Those who are living in Pakistan, they are few in numbers now, they are existing in Pakistan. So if you are a small community living in a majority country, so there are, of course, there are a lot of challenges to survive in the country. Sustainable economy, costly rituals become the reason of conversion, media, insensitivity of tourism impacting this culture a lot. So what I feel, when I was a little kid, I was a school student. In my schools, I feel that there is a big threat for my community because our schools' syllabus are not according to our culture, because we are living in the Islamic Republic country. So our syllabus is more, they are more Islamic, and so when we go to school, we learn a lot about the other religion as compared to our own religion. So I started after school sessions with my kids, with my community. I was a volunteer teacher in my community, and I started teaching them. After my graduation, when I complete my studies, I become an archaeologist, and I was a government servant. So the government posted me in different part of Pakistan for my job. So I was not able to go back to the valleys to teach the students about their culture and tradition values. I encouraged my sister to do the same job for the kids part-time in her home. So she is my sister. She is trying to educate the people about their culture and traditions after the school, because I think this is the best way to connect the people. This is the best way to teach the kids about their own culture and tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, 2018 is really kind to me. It's really ignite the change happened in my life, my struggle work. And in 2018, my department, Directorate of Archaeology and Museums, Government of KPK, ready to spend 60 million rupees to preservation and promotion of Kalash culture. That was the big achievement in my life. That was in very first time happened in Kalash Valley. Never before, never in history, anybody can do this kind of tangible work in the valleys. The people were totally ignored. But in 2018, they're ready to spend 60 million rupees to acquire a land for their religious festivals, to acquire land for their graveyards. We are preserving the traditional houses, and also we are preserving the altars of Kalashas. Of course, we are training the we will train the new generation, the coming generation, about the importance of Kalash culture and religion. Ladies and gentlemen, I belong to the small community in Kalash. When I was a small kid, I saw the bureaucrats come to my valley, and they forced the ladies to dance for them, because dance is an entertainment for the entire world, but not in Kalash. The Kalash dance because it is the part of their religion. So the females especially, they feel embarrassed to dance by force. They're not will to dance for them, but they think it's an entertainment for the people. But no more. In 2019, I was surrounded by the positive people. He is the Deputy Commissioner of Chitral. He is not forcing the people to dance for him. He is encouraging the youngsters to participate in their religious festivals very proudly. So this is the change happening in my valleys in 2018. I think this is my struggles, this happening in 2018. I'm really very happy. Ladies and gentlemen, within 5 months, I received 2 government appreciation awards from the government, and the smiling face of my people, who, when they were happy to see me, when I told them that I am spending 60 million rupees to preserve and promote the Kalash culture in the valleys, when I saw their smiling face, how they welcomed me into the valley, that was a big achievement in my life. I think that's never happened in my life. So, being a daughter of Kalash, it was my responsibility to feel them, that they can feel that we are belonging from the rich culture, that we are belonging from the, from the most important people who are still existing in the world after 8,000 years. They do their culture activities, they do their culture festivities, not for the camera, not for the media. They do it because they're proud to be a Kalashi. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gul. Next, we have Aziz Abu Sarah. Aziz says that he builds relationships, not walls, amid the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His childhood as a Palestinian boy in Jerusalem was shattered when his brother was imprisoned, tortured, and killed, and he spent his teen years working in the resistance movement. But after high school, he gradually transformed from feeling like a victim to wanting to be a bridge builder. He is the co-executive director of George Mason University's Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution. There he builds alliances between Jewish and Arab Americans, and he has launched a unique study abroad program that brings students to the Middle East. He was named one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world by the Royal Islamic Strategy Studies Center, and he was honored by the UN former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for his peace work. Aziz?
I grew up in Jerusalem. This is me when I was a little kid, and I know what you're thinking. Wow, you used to look cute. What happened since then? I grew up in, I remember tourists coming to me when I was a kid, and they'll get really close because, tourists like to go to Jerusalem, and they'll take photos of me. And I liked it because I like a little attention. But then they would go without talking to me, and I felt like being objectified. I grew up in Jerusalem, a city of walls. Walls of ignorance, walls of fear, walls of hatred. And having my brother being killed, that was very strong in my life. And it took me until I was 18 years old when I first crossed between East Jerusalem to West Jerusalem. The hardest ever travel I did, 200 meters only, yet the most rewarding one. Because travel is not about distance, travel is about a state of mind. And this led me to meet with Scott Cooper, my Jewish friend, who together we started a social enterprise called Majdi, which means honor and respect, to connect people who are travelers to places and to stories they wouldn't normally hear otherwise, to make them understand that no place is homogeneous. There is no single story about anywhere. And we can see the diversity of every place. What that meant, in a place like Israel and Palestine, having an Israeli and a Palestinian guide, guiding together. In Ireland, a Catholic and Protestant, bringing people to meet locals and understand the life they can have and hear different views from archaeologists and historians and artists, eating with families. This is my mom, and this is the best food you can ever have. Imagine the discussions that you would have on these trips. But then some would say, where's the fun in this trip? Well, one, education is fun. But second, there's a lot of impact. And the impact goes so much beyond. This is Yuval and Hussam, two of our guides. When Yuval wanted to get married, he invited Hussam, the Palestinian, to officiate his Jewish wedding. Imagine that. But also, we do have some fun. I mean, we go to the Dead Sea and float, which apparently you need to have a National Geographic magazine for that to happen. We go to Vietnam and have fun. But to me, the most important things are the stories. 90-year-old woman in Vietnam who told me about how she's still farming, about how she hid people in her home in the American War. You call it here the Vietnam War. Stories are powerful. An Arab traveler said, travel makes you speechless, but then it turns you into a storyteller. And I wonder how many people travel but don't have stories to tell. Stephen Hawking said that aggression is the biggest threat to our lives. And that's why I work. My mission is to bring down the walls that divide people, walls of hatred, ignorance, and fear. And I realized my mission was too narrow because you can't go to a place like Lake Atitlán in Guatemala and talk only about differences between communities without talking about unemployment, without talking about the importance of community tourism there, without talking about the pollution in the lake. You can't go to a place like Colombia and work on the issues there with the FARC and the government, which I've done, without talking about other issues as well. Things like trafficking of animals, things like poaching. And what I realized is that travel has so much power we don't know. Because it can build and it can destroy our ecosystem. And I want to be on the side that builds. It is not enough for travel companies to say, oh, we donate 0.5% of our income to be socially responsible, and too many do that. It's not socially responsible to destroy the reef on your trips. It is not socially responsible for the 1.2 billion people who travel internationally every year to use plastic again and again. It is not socially responsible to not pay people right, to underpay locals. It is not socially responsible to do any of that. And imagine what we could do if we transform this industry. 1.2 billion people travel internationally every year. Together, we can change the world through travel. If we travel a little differently, not going from one side to side to see things, but to experience things, to feel it, to connect to the locals. So I invite you to travel differently and to change the world as you travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Next, we have Dr. Losang Rabgey, who holds a PhD in gender and anthropology from the University of London, where she was the first Tibetan to become a Commonwealth scholar. Losang and her sister, Dr. Tashi Rabgey, co-founded Machik, whose mission is to incubate social innovation for Tibet. In 2006, she was named a National Geographic Emerging Scholar for her innovative work in gender equality and bridging cultural divides. Her current research interests include gender equality, social innovation, and conservation for Tibet. Born in India and raised in Canada, Losang first returned to Tibet with her family in 1987. Losang?
Thank you, Debra. Greetings from the Tibetan language. When most people think of Tibet, they think of it as a long-standing area of dispute. How, in such an area of uncertainty, do you do work that puts the needs and desires of the people of Tibet in the center? 20 years ago, my sister and I started Machik as a way to explore new methods to bridge cultural divides. In 1987, it began quite profoundly for me when our parents took us back to Tibet. And my sister and I were actually teenagers, soon heading off to college. That's dating me, but anyway. And we met our cousins in Tibet for the first time, and they were all illiterate. I realized very quickly that I am no more intelligent than they are, I deserve no more opportunities than they do, and the profound pain of global disparity embedded itself in our minds. We needed to find a way to deliver social services and really exercise deep listening. We found that opportunity about 10 years later when the Tibetan people in my father's village, nestled way up high, about 13,500 feet, expressed their desire for the first ever truly mother tongue-based bilingual education for their children, something which they had never had. This is the school that existed before our engagement. It had very low learning outcomes, and this today is what we have functioning for the last 16 years. The beginning was very challenging. There were many, many obstacles, too many to go through today, but it started with a tremendous leap of love. My parents, who are now retired, decided to put my father's retirement income at the time into building the primary school. And then that followed with support from many good friends around the world. Today, this is the #1 bilingual mother tongue-based school in the region. And as of this month, 38 students from the original class will have graduated from college in Tibetan history, literature, graphic design, even a graduate among them here, the first Tibetan woman ever to become a bilingual lawyer. So much rests on their young shoulders. I'm extremely proud and thrilled that 6 of these students are now teachers at the school that they attended as rural primary school kids. Along the way, there was so much well-meaning sort of suggestions that this may not be the best way to spend my career, such as it is. But we are deeply inspired by people's willingness to empathize with different perspectives and different regions even, to come together to make something new happen. Along the way, while doing this work of education in the rural areas, we leveraged our skills to create yet again something new. The Summer Enrichment Program is a brand new space, a safe learning space, where Tibetan, Chinese, and global kids gather, and young volunteer teachers gather for about a month, live and work together, teaching Tibetan, English, music, arts, science, you name it. And during those 4 weeks, what happens is that they temporarily have the opportunity, and the new opportunity, to suspend their preconceptions of each other long enough to build a new kind of trust across the divides. And when you make that space, then you can start to have a real conversation. It takes time and it takes effort. I'm happy to share more of that with anyone who's interested. We then learned that while we were doing this service work in Tibet with so much love in our hearts for the work, we realized it was urgently necessary to communicate this work, how we do it, why we do it, how it's possible, back to the diaspora Tibetan community as well as to the global community. So again, we created a brand new safe space. My sister inaugurated the Machik Weekend idea about 12 years ago. And in the beginning, it was 30 people in our little office. Today, it's become a forum, an annual forum for about 450 to 500 people from around the world. And we gather and to look at each other as people, to look at the problems and challenges in Tibet, and to dare to convene to find solutions to the solvable problems. You are all obviously invited. And I want to conclude by saying that in order to have a perpetual planet, I really believe that what we need is a brave and bold new kind of leadership at every level around the world that takes an intersectional approach to solving our most urgent problems. We need to integrate culture. We need to integrate language, archaeology, all the kinds of work that come together along with conservation science. When all of these work hand in hand, we will be much more informed and much more comprehensive in our approach. I think it is possible to build cultural empathy, but it's only going to be possible if we collectively decide to take on hard challenges for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Losang. And finally, Erika Larsen will walk us through her work. Erika is a multidisciplinary storyteller known for her essays which document cultures that maintain close ties with nature. Larsen has shot multiple stories for National Geographic magazine and was part of the team that produced the magazine's 2016 single topic on Yellowstone. She is also one of her featured photographers in National Geographic's Popular Women of Vision exhibit. She's the recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship, which sponsored her study of the North Sami language and her monograph, Sami, Walking with Reindeer. For her fellowship, Erika will continue her ongoing work of documenting the ancestral and contemporary connections between animals and the indigenous people of the Americas. Erika?
I just first want to say I am so thankful to be on the stage with the three people you just heard. Is amazing, and to me that is human evolution. So, thanks. Okay, so what you see here, my father gave me this picture when I was a child, and I was holding it in my hands, and I thought to myself, how does something that is seemingly so far away feel like a part of me? As a teenager, I would follow hunters into the depths of nature, and there I began to feel like a fine-tuned instrument, and I realized that I was one part of these cycles of life and death. In this moment, I realized nature would become my greatest teacher, and that I would become a storyteller. I've dedicated my time and my passion to following and meeting and learning people from diverse cultures that have close connections to nature. I see them as interpreters, people that hold knowledge. I would follow children hunters, and they would teach me early on that I needed to find the tools to interpret what they were teaching me, and these tools would change with each person I would meet. It's like a bag of tools you have with you, and every story is different, and you need to find the way to tell it. It's not the same way each time. I would learn that these children wanted to be wildlife biologists, they wanted to be scientists, they wanted to write amazing novels about the greatness of nature. I would move for a small amount of time to the Peruvian Amazon because I wanted to understand the uses of medicinal plants. The people there would tell me these plants had a spirit, they had a voice, but more importantly, they had one unique purpose in a great ecosystem. And they would tell me that we all could hear that voice if we were just silent enough to listen. So I learned with them to be silent. I would move to the Scandinavian Arctic, where I would live with a family of Sami reindeer herders. And here I would learn about the connection with animal husbandry, but more importantly, I learned there were people that could interpret the Arctic landscape metaphorically, but also realistically with their language. They taught me that in order to hear them, I had to experience daily life, and that was it. The profoundness of daily life, washing dishes, taking care of children, and just being with the ones you love. I would learn North Sami language and realize it had more words to describe the Arctic in a profound way than I could have ever imagined. And by learning this language, I transformed into another layer, into another person, into a different type of storyteller. One of the most important things I learned from the Sami was that it is through suffering, but through our empathy, that we will evolve on this human journey. I would follow the horse into Native American culture, and here they would teach me that I had to partake in ritual to understand what they were teaching me. Rituals like this, just rituals, a mother and a son together. I would follow the Yupik, and with them I would learn through the fish, through the walrus, and through the seals, through subsistence living. And they would teach me there's a great ecosystem in the depth of our oceans. And they would teach me that these resources are finite, and it is our job, all of us together, to pay attention to that and to make a difference in that and to understand what's happening. And there is a language of evolution happening. The Yupik come from a long line of storytellers, a part of an ancient tradition that I'm proud to be a part of. And this ancient tradition is important because they told me that through storytelling we can heal. So this is the next part of my journey. I'm going blind, I really believe that. And the more blind I get, the more you can see. I've heard that there is a cultural reunification happening in the northern and southern hemisphere, so I'm going to start in the Western Arctic and work my way down to the south. I don't know what I'm seeing, but I know that I'm going to gather the tools. And I know it has to start with me, that I'm the one that has to open myself up to what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, and never ask anything more of the people you're meeting than you're willing to give of yourself. And I hope that this is one part of building this two-way window into understanding our human journey. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Each of you talked about the impact of your own experiences on your work. Can you talk about how you built understanding within yourself so that you could help others? You know, Losang, maybe starting with you.
How I built understanding within myself. Well, I think my own upbringing, I grew up in a very small town in Canada, being one of the few families who were people of color. I think that was a really, it taught me a lot about how to seek ways to bridge cultural divides. That has trained me early on and given me valuable insight that has carried me through the last 20 years of this work for sure. And I feel very fortunate to come from a tradition that really teaches about the importance of moving past yourself. And if I sounds vague, but it's very clear to me, the importance of doing that in order to put aside some of your own feelings sometimes in order to make space to hear the other.
And the three of you have previously talked about radical empathy. Aziz, can you talk about the role that radical empathy and intense listening has played in the work that you've done, why you believe it's important, and what you think it can lead to?
Absolutely. I grew up very angry after my brother was killed, and for 8 years that was my focus. And it wasn't until for the first time I met Israelis and got to talk to them and hear their stories, which was very difficult. When you're in conflict with somebody, it's very hard to take a step back and listen because you think, I'm right. And to me, I felt always I was pursuing justice when I was in reality pursuing revenge. And the line between justice and revenge is a very thin line. But I think what helped me most is having people in my life who pushed me toward that, who said, you need to listen, stop doing what you're doing. Whether my Jewish partner, Scott, who we worked together I took him to Afghanistan with me. Taking a Jew to Afghanistan apparently is not that popular. People like in Colombia, when I went there, I met with Ivan Valencia, who is a photojournalist, and he got me to understand the different sides of the conflict there. I used his photos at the end, understand the other issues that I wouldn't do. So listening to people, hearing their stories, understanding where they're coming from, and trying to live, like you mentioned earlier, trying to live the way they live, I think is what makes the biggest difference.
Erika, what's your sense of how storytelling can play a role in building cultural understanding and creating empathy?
You know, I think through storytelling, we break down a lot of barriers. I think we don't feel defensive, and we can open up, and I think our minds, like, we become more open to the feelings that are needed to listen to people. And I don't know, storytelling is one of the most powerful tools for doing that. And not being told something, but interactive storytelling, feeling that, you know, story is created by two things, three things, things together. It's two-way street.
Gul, what lessons can you share about trying to both preserve a culture on one hand and to get recognition and acknowledgement for it on the other?
Thank you. First of all, I born in a family who are, you know, from the ancient times, who are volunteers. My grandmother, she is a herbal doctor. She still treated the villagers. And my mom, she is a community judge, but she's not educated, and she take decisions in the village. Sometimes I learn a lot of things from my mama, and sometimes I ask her, Mom, if you were educated, you will be the next prime minister after Benazir Bhutto in Islamic Republic. But the day, as a volunteer to work for the culture, I'm not the key of every door, but I'm trying to be key of every door. I'm archaeologist. To being in archaeology, to being in a museum, to work for the government is a part of my job. To doing work for the culture, to preserve that culture, and to educate the young generation about the importance of their own culture is my passion. It's my feelings. It's, I feel that's my love for my community. It's not easy, if you are teaching your kids about their own culture values and importance. When you are going outside, you also teach the people what's the importance of this culture, because everybody is not understanding your culture. What are you doing? Some people, they come to the valleys, they even say that, what are you people are doing? It's 8,000 years old tradition. Leave it. What are you doing? So, to feel them that, understand that this culture is not like that. You have to understand, the people who are surviving since 8,000 years, so they have the importance in this. So I hope for the best in the future. Maybe I can do something. Wow. Yeah, thank you.
So Losang, when you made your first trip to Tibet in 1987, you talked about the differences. So can you describe for us a bit of how you felt like a part of a community, yet so different? And then what were the next steps as you planned what you might do to make a difference?
That's a great question. I think having grown up in the diaspora, I learned a certain Tibetan dialect. And then when we landed in my father's village, I quickly realized I have some more language learning to do. And so that was the first thing. And I remember the first or few days, we had 200 students gathered in the school. The school was going to open. They were just terribly excited. And I couldn't speak the local dialect. And there was one girl out of 200 kids who could understand what I was speaking, and it's because she had lived in Lhasa for a few years with her mom and moved back to the village. So that little girl was my translator for the first week. But beyond that, I think it's the most humbling experience to have gone back and learn directly that going back to even my own father's village, we have to earn the respect of the local people. We have to, again, many years of deep listening, trying to understand their vision of what they want to see, trying to build trust fundamentally by collaborating with local Tibetan communities and coming up with solutions to their local needs together and delivering on them.
Wow, great. So Aziz, you talked about travel. as an opportunity for bridge building. But what is it about the travel? What in the experience do you think has the opportunity to bring people together?
I think when we travel, we are a lot more open-minded. We are looking for an experience. We're looking for something different. And we go out of our normal bubble that we live in, the comfort zone that we create around ourselves. And so the moment you step out of that, you have such an opportunity to change. There's an opportunity for an exchange, for new culture, for new experiences and new ideas. There's a knowledge about wildlife, knowledge about all kinds of things that you wouldn't have otherwise that travel would create for you. But I think the challenge is, to me, is how do we make that work also in our own cities? Like I said, the hardest travel for me was 200 meters. And I think the hardest travel for everyone here is 200 meters. I ran a trip here where it was led by a conservative and liberal in DC. And all our travelers were from DC. And we went to different neighborhoods in the city that most of us have not visited before. And the assumption was we're going to fight all the time because we were led by a conservative and a liberal. And we didn't. We had such an amazing conversation. So travel gives us this ability to have dialogue that sometimes we don't on normal days.
Erika, can you talk about the potential of a photograph to create dialogue or to build understanding? And then related to that, when you approach a new assignment, do you go in with a blank slate? You talked about having assignments come to you or having a place come to you or sort of being absorbed in a place. How does that process work?
I actually, I do, sorry, on to the second one first. I believe that I really do enter as much as I can as a blank slate. Of course, you do a little bit of research, but I think the story we're searching for, maybe this is that universality, why the story we're searching for is within all of us, right? So you know it already because you hold it as well. You just realize that everyone else holds it too, so you're trying to exchange those stories. So it is a blank slate, but we already know it anyways. What was the first question? Sorry.
So that's good.
Okay.
I'm going to get to that, but I do want to begin to take some questions from the audience before we run out of time. And as you begin to think about your questions, I have one more for the group, and that's getting us back to human connections. You've talked about the work that you've done to date. Can you talk a little bit about what the next steps are in your work?
Yeah, for me, I'm engaged for 3 years to preservation and promotion of Kalash culture because we are, as I told, we are spending 60 million in first time in Kalash. So that's my first priority, to work in Kalash to preserve that particular culture. And of course, we are doing to train the students, and that they can enough knowledge to tell the world what we are. Because for the single person, it's not easy to tell the entire world that who we are. So the first question is, how could we do it? I am also, unfortunately, an accident was happening with me in 2015, and my bag was stolen from some people in gunpoint. So I lost all my data. I was planning to make a documentary about entire Kalasha people. So I'm again start that project, and that will be finished in 2-3 months. So I will tell the world that who the Kalashas are. So I can send the documentary each and everyone who interested, so they can watch the documentary and they can know about the 1,000 years old people. So that's, that's the biggest challenge for me. Thank you.
I work in an industry of 1.2 billion people, so there's a lot of work to do. My company name is Mejdi, which means honor and respect. And my goal is that when people think of travel, they start redefining the idea. It's not just going to an all-inclusive resort somewhere and not meet anybody on your trip, that it's really an immersion experience. And my hope is that we can inspire other companies to do the same thing, that it's not only a few of us. What's next for us? We work now in 16 destinations. Want to double that and triple that and quadruple that. So if you can help, please talk to me.
Losang?
Yeah, so for the last 20 years, we've been working in an area of the world that is uncertain. And by definition, therefore, it's very difficult to have a beautifully laid out 5-year plan. However, given that context, we know that we began this work with a certain core set of values, and it's those values that are always going to steer us, given the changing context. So we will work with the context that we face. Having said that, we are very excited to continue and grow our gender work. We just held the first Machik Gender Summit. It was so exciting. 35 Tibetan women coming together to have a no social media kind of conversation. And it was an honor and privilege to be in that room with these amazing, strong women. And also, I can't say too much at the moment, but we are hoping to grow our work with indigenous communities here. And I'm very moved that we're here now on traditional Piscataway land. And last night I had the great honor to be among indigenous elder women at a celebration that they were holding, and to share with the time and space with them. So many new ideas in the works.
Erika?
I think so I've been talking to some people, no, but I think we're all in a time that there's a new language coming, and I think we're all listening to it, and we're all hearing it, and we're just trying to figure out what it means to all of us. So I think I'm just going to spend as long as I can trying to meet the people that can help me translate that new language, and that's all of you in the room, people on the stage. I'm just gonna keep trying to tell stories about that.
Questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you all for sharing your stories. I know that a key to cultural exchange is often access. You've all shared stories about access to insular communities, or maybe the challenges of accessing authority figures or working through bureaucracy in difficult situations. Can you share one anecdote of when you've had a problem with access and kind of how you problem solved around it?
Well, the kind of travel we do sometimes can be problematic, so I won't name the country, but we had to submit our itinerary to the government to approve our trip before, and that country had never had, apparently, people go to meet others. So it was all archaeology, history, period, and we got rejected. And so fortunately, the United Nations helped us get the access, and we had to call people, call friends, call everybody we know, and eventually those calls worked, and we were able to establish our programs there where we were able to see and meet locals and have lectures and dine with locals, which made a huge difference. And the amazing thing, the people who came on that trip are still engaged in that country 8 years later.
Other questions? We have one here, there's one here, and then over here.
Okay. My question is, do you feel that everyone, like every human being, has a culture that they belong to? Kind of open-ended.
Go ahead.
Yeah, of course, everyone have culture, I think. It's very simple. I think so. I don't know about the others' opinion, because I think everyone have their culture background. Everyone belongs to a rich culture. If we understand that culture, what is our background, that will be wonderful. Everyone have culture, I think so. But I don't know about the others' opinion. Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that. Good question. I think that if you speak a language, whether it's verbally or sign language, if you eat food and live somewhere, you have a set of lived cultural practices, and that's
the way of life. Yeah.
Exactly. That's everyone's experience, and it's different. Even within a family, it can be different. When we use the word ethnic to indicate something like people of color or somebody different from you, it implies that being cultural is the other. Whereas I really think it's important to see that we all have a set of experiences and practices that are relevant and equal.
There's a question down here.
Hi, this question is for Erika. You go into these communities where oftentimes they aren't used to outsiders. And how do you go about that? That's where my mind just goes, wow. Like you just join a community, and are they embracing of you? Are you, I mean, how do you go about even saying, hey, I'm going to join your community, I'm going to learn your language, and I'm going to live with you for a couple years? So.
That's a good question. Okay, I think it's like this. I go in, I think just being very open about the fact that I'm there to learn. And that I think I regard myself, if like in the words we can use, like a student. So I'm just going in as a student, I'm there to learn. And sometimes I ask specifically what it is I want to learn about. And sometimes I don't, sometimes I don't know, I just want to learn something. So that's the way it's worked for me.
We have another question right down at the front. And then there's one over here.
Aziz, I love your message. Thank you very much for that message. I wonder, I love you talking about responsible tourism and sustainable tourism. And I know that here this week we've been talking a lot about virtual experiences, about people trying to take people virtually around the world now, whether it's to archaeological sites or, you know, for someone like me that's into wildlife conservation, sometimes we're concerned about the over-trafficking of some of these really special places, these incredible phenomenons, animal phenomenons. We just don't want it to be over-trafficked. Are you guys concerned about what people might be missing if we start taking people on these like virtual experiences to these places when you guys seem so connected to the actual people and the culture of these locations around the world?
I'm not, because I think it will encourage people to go and see these places and care about these places more. When I did the Holy Sepulchre exhibit, which I'm from Jerusalem, so I know everything there, and it was such a moving place, and I think the people I walked in with walked out saying, I love this place, I care about this place, I want to go and see it now in person. I think there's nothing that replaces that. But it does give strength to, not everybody can travel. And those who can't, being able to see the places and learn about them in virtual reality, I think that's a beautiful thing. We can all complement each other. I don't see it as a competition.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to stand up just because I'm so short. My perception is that all of you all would be doing this work whether or not you had a global platform to talk about it and to share your stories. So I'm curious whether the exposure that you all have gotten has ever brought some type of conflict to the mission of your project.
Anybody?
Okay.
Exposure has been good for my work. I'm trying to convince people to do responsible travel, so the more there's exposure, I talk about connection, dialogue, negotiations. I can't talk about everything I do because I don't only work in travel, I do work in negotiations and conflict resolution in war zones, so I can't always talk about that, but there are issues I can talk about, and I want people to know that we can all get along together, not just by faking and eating together, and in Jerusalem we say eating hummus together, which is a good idea. But by really starting to listen and challenge our presuppositions and our ideas and be willing to accept that we might be wrong about what we know.
We are almost out of time, but I know there's a really burgeoning question down here, so if we could take this one last question.
It is very obvious of the diversity of ethnic backgrounds, and it's also very obvious that each of you and us, we're all proud of our ethnicity and our backgrounds and our cultures, and would like to show the best side of them to the other general populace. Whether it is your hospitality, or whether it's your intelligence, or whether it is, whatever each culture has to offer. The biggest question that is bothering me is, how do we enable people to open their minds up, to be more receptive, to get rid of their prejudices, some of which are even taught in schools to little children, so they grow up with these prejudices. And how can we make people, more, like I'm blind and now I see sort of thing, so that we can make a more harmonious coexistence among all these diversity.
Does one of you want to take that as we wrap up, Losang?
Sure. I'll try to answer that. Thank you for the question. This is a huge passion for us, is overcoming prejudices. The summer program that I mentioned to you, if I can share one story, we create a safe environment where Tibetan Chinese global young people are with us every day, working, learning together. It creates familiarity with different kinds of people who don't usually have that. That's huge. And it's not a weekend, it's not a week, it's a month. And it's in situ, it's inside the region. Very hard to pull off, very, very difficult. We did it about a dozen times, and in different years, several times relocated, and through all that hardship, the Tibetan Chinese global cohort really pulled together and bonded because they had a shared experience. They realized that there was a divide, not based on ethnicity, but on values. And when we work together, become familiar, go through adversity together, and see that, oh, you know what, on this side of the line that cares about education, healthcare, conservation, gender, whatever it is that you care about, we're all here together. One young woman came to this work, a young Chinese woman, who gave up a well-paid summer internship to work with our kids. And one of the Tibetan students specifically asked not to have a Chinese teacher. Well, they ended up working together. And when he faced potential expulsion from his high school for leaving his county that year, the young Chinese woman, whose parents were not exactly pleased with her for her choices with us, she got on the phone and convinced her parents to take this young Tibetan student into their home for free for 2 years to finish high school. That only took 3 weeks of working within the program. And the best option was for him to return home, obviously, and which in the end, that's what happened. But our scale is not huge, but we're trying very hard to overcome this kind of prejudices that we are all taught, and create just the beginning at these young people's stages in developing their thinking and opinions to create a space when they can unlearn and relearn.
Thank you for that example. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to continue, but we just want to thank each of you for the work that you're doing to try to expose us to mutual understanding and create mutual purpose. Thank you all for participating in the conversation. There's more to come. Please don't leave. Thank you very much.